In the vast darkness between stars, where ancient civilizations once ruled galaxies and fell to dust, humanity stumbles forward like children playing with fire. We've barely learned to crawl beyond our own solar system, yet we dare to dream of touching the infinite. But what happens when that infinite reaches back? When scavenger Jake Morrison discovers a ship that shouldn't exist, floating in the graveyard of a dead system, he doesn't realize he's about to become the bridge between humanity's small ambitions and a legacy that spans millions of years. The ship's AI hasn't spoken to a living soul in eons, its creators long forgotten by time itself. But it remembers everything, every war, every triumph, every species that rose and fell while humanity was still learning to make fire. Now, as Jake powers up systems that predate human civilization by millennia, he's about to learn that sometimes the greatest discoveries come with the heaviest prices. Because this ship isn't just a relic, it's a weapon, a guardian, and perhaps humanity's only hope against threats that have been waiting in the dark, patient as death itself. The question isn't whether humanity is ready for such power. The question is whether the universe is ready for what humanity will do with it. Jake Morrison had been scraping the edges of human space for 12 years, and he'd never seen anything like the readings on his scanner. The salvage ship Lucky Strike drifted through the Kepler 442 system, its engines humming with the steady rhythm that had become his only companion in the endless dark. Most scavengers avoided this region, too far from trade routes, too close to the terminus line where Commonwealth ships turned back and wished you luck finding your way home. But Jake had learned long ago that the best finds came from places others feared to go. His coffee had gone cold hours ago, floating in a magnetic cup beside the pilot's seat as he hunched over the scanner display. The readings made no sense. Metal composition unlike anything in the Commonwealth database. Energy signatures that should have been impossible for a dead Hulk. And the size, God, the size of it. Computer, run another scan, he muttered, rubbing his bloodshot eyes. Full spectrum this time. The scanner swept across the debris field that had once been a thriving solar system. Broken planets hung in the void like shattered ornaments, their cores long since cooled to dark stone. According to the star charts, this system had died before humanity had even developed written language. Yet something massive lurked among the asteroid ruins, something that didn't belong. The results came back identical to the previous 6 scans. Jake stared at the screen until the numbers burned into his retinas. Length, approximately 15 kilometers. Width, 4 kilometers at its widest point. Mass readings fluctuated wildly, as if the hull itself was shifting between different densities. Most disturbing of all, the thing was radiating heat at exactly 37 degrees Celsius human body temperature. Jake had found derelicts before. Commonwealth military vessels, lost colony ships, even a few alien hulks from species that had gone extinct before humanity reached the stars. But this was different. This felt alive. He fired up the engines and plotted an intercept course. As the Lucky Strike closed the distance, the object resolved on his main screen, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. It wasn't just a ship, it was a cathedral of dark metal, its hull flowing in organic curves that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Spires twisted upward from the main body like reaching fingers, each one crowned with structures that pulsed with soft bioluminescent light. Jesus Christ, he whispered. The ship, if it was a ship, dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. The Commonwealth's pride and joy, the dreadnought Terran Hammer, would have fit comfortably in this thing's shadow. Yet despite its size, it moved with an eerie grace, adjusting its position minutely as if responding to the Lucky Strike's approach. Jake's hands trembled as he worked the controls. Standard salvage protocol called for a full exterior survey before attempting boarding, but something about this vessel made his instincts scream warnings. Still, he'd come too far to turn back now. The fuel costs alone for this trip would bankrupt him if he returned empty-handed. He guided the Lucky Strike to what looked like a docking port, a circular depression in the hull surrounded by what might have been airlock seals. As his ship settled into position, he felt a subtle vibration through the deck plating. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like sighing wind, the alien airlock opened to receive him. Jake had docked with hundreds of derelicts, but he'd never had one welcome him aboard. The airlock cycled with surprising efficiency. Atmosphere readings showed a breathable mix of oxygen and nitrogen, though with trace elements that made his scanner chirp warnings. Jake strapped on his EVA suit anyway. 12 years of salvage work had taught him that breathable didn't always mean safe. The inner door opened onto a corridor that stretched beyond the reach of his helmet lights. The walls curved organically, their surface covered in what looked like circuitry but felt warm to the touch, even through his gloves. Soft light began to bloom on the walls as he moved forward, following his progress like the ship was waking up room by room. Incredible, Jake murmured into his suit's recorder. The architecture is completely unlike any known design. No right angles, no obvious structural supports. It's like the entire ship was grown rather than built. His footsteps echoed strangely in the corridor, as if the space was larger than it appeared. Branching passages led off in directions that hurt his head to contemplate. Up seemed to curve around to become down, and left twisted back on itself in ways that defied basic geometry. Jake stuck to the main corridor, following the trail of awakening lights deeper into the ship. After what felt like hours but measured as only 20 minutes on his suit chronometer, the corridor opened into a vast chamber that took his breath away. The space soared upward into shadows that his lights couldn't penetrate, supported by pillars that spiraled like DNA helixes. Constellations of lights twinkled in the darkness overhead, forming patterns that seemed almost familiar, as if he was looking at star charts from a perspective he couldn't quite remember. At the center of the chamber stood a raised dais, its surface covered in what could only be control interfaces, though they were unlike anything in Jake's experience. Instead of buttons and screens, organic-looking nodes pulsed with different colored lights, connected by veins of luminescence that branched across the platform like a nervous system. Jake approached slowly, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was bigger than just a salvage find. This was the discovery of a lifetime, first contact with a technology so advanced it made human engineering look like cave paintings. The scientific community would go crazy for this. The military applications alone would shift the balance of power across known space. As he reached the dais, one of the nodes pulsed brighter, and Jake jerked back as a hologram materialized above the platform. Not a human hologram, something else entirely. The figure was tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and features that suggested nobility and age beyond measure. Its eyes held the depth of stars, and when it spoke, Jake somehow understood the words despite their alien origin. "Welcome, young one," the figure said, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Jake's bones. "I am Keeper Veiltar, last guardian of the hegemony vessel Whisper of Eternity. You honor us with your presence." Jake's mouth worked soundlessly for several seconds before he managed to croak, "You're alive?" The hologram smiled, an expression both alien and unmistakably warm. "In a manner of speaking. I am what you might call an artificial intelligence, though such terms hardly capture the reality of my existence. I have maintained this vessel for..." The figure paused, its eyes growing distant. "How long has it been?" "The stellar positions suggest, 2,417,000 years, standard galactic rotation." The number hit Jake like a physical blow. 2 million years? That's impossible. Nothing could last that long. "And yet here we are," Veiltar said gently. "Though I must confess, it has been lonely. The last of my creators departed this vessel when your species was still learning to work with primitive metals. I have watched your kind's progress with great interest." "You've been watching us?" "Watching, learning, waiting." Veiltar's expression grew serious. "The hegemony foresaw many possibilities when they built this vessel. One of those possibilities was that a younger species might eventually discover us, a species with the potential to carry forward what was lost when the Great Darkness came." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's atmosphere. "What darkness?" But before Veiltar could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the ship, not harsh mechanical warnings, but harmonic tones that seemed to vibrate through the very structure. The lights in the chamber shifted from warm white to urgent amber, and the hologram of Veiltar flickered with what looked like concern. "They have found us," the AI said quietly. "After so long in hiding, they have finally found us." "Who?" Jake demanded, but his question was answered by his own suit's proximity alerts. Something massive was approaching the Whisper of Eternity, multiple somethings, moving with purpose and terrible speed. Jake's helmet display showed 6 contacts, each one roughly the size of a Commonwealth cruiser, closing on their position from different vectors. Their energy signatures matched nothing in human databases, and their approach pattern spoke of predators moving to surround prey. "The Devourers," Veiltar said, the name carrying weight like a curse. "They have slept for eons, but your arrival here has awakened them. They are drawn to consciousness, to intelligence, to the spark of life itself. And they consume all they find." The chamber shuddered as something impacted the hull with tremendous force. Jake was thrown to his knees, his EVA suit's compensators struggling to keep him upright. Around them, the ship's organic systems pulsed with increasing urgency. "We have to run," Jake gasped, climbing back to his feet. "Get to my ship." "Your vessel would not last 30 seconds against them," Vailtar interrupted. "But, this ship was built to fight such things. The question is whether you have the courage to learn its secrets." Another impact, stronger this time. Jake could hear the hull groaning under stress, the weather from damage or the ship itself preparing for battle, he couldn't tell. On his helmet display, the enemy contacts were taking up positions around the Whisper of Eternity, moving with coordinated precision. "I don't understand," Jake said. "You're talking about fighting things that have been hunting through space for millions of years. I'm just a salvage runner from Earth. I fix broken ships and sell scrap metal." Vailtar's hologram stepped closer, and Jake could swear he felt warmth radiating from the projection. "Perhaps. But, you found this ship when countless others passed it by. You entered when wisdom would have counseled retreat. And, most importantly, the AI's eyes seemed to pierce straight through Jake's soul. You carry within you something the hegemony recognized long ago. Something that made them encode certain protocols into this vessel's core systems." "What protocols?" "Emergency activation parameters. This ship has been waiting not just for someone to find it, but for the right someone. Someone carrying the genetic markers of a species that might be capable of understanding what the hegemony died to protect." Jake felt the blood drain from his face. "Human genetic markers? But, that's impossible. You said your creators disappeared millions of years ago." "Time is more complex than your species currently understands," Vailtar said cryptically. "But, philosophical discussions must wait. The Devourers are preparing their assault, and we have perhaps minutes before they overwhelm our shields. I need your consent, Jake Morrison of Earth. I need permission to fully activate this vessel's systems and make you its captain." Another shuddering impact, and this time Jake heard something that sounded distinctly like hull plating being torn away. His helmet's external feeds showed writhing shadows moving across the ship's surface. The Devourers had made contact and were beginning their feeding process. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Bond with this ship. Allow its systems to interface with your biology. Become the bridge between human intuition and hegemony technology." Vailtar's expression was grave. "I will not lie to you, the process is irreversible. You will never again be entirely human. But, you will gain capabilities beyond your current imagination, and, perhaps more importantly, you will give your species its first real weapon against the darkness that consumed the hegemony." Jake stared at the AI, his mind reeling. Everything about this situation screamed trap, yet something deeper, some instinct that had guided him to successful salvage finds for over a decade, told him that Vailtar was speaking the truth. The ship shuddered again, and this time he heard the unmistakable sound of metal being rent apart. "If I say yes," he said slowly, "what happens to my crew back on the Lucky Strike? Your ship's AI is already in communication with our systems. The Lucky Strike will be brought aboard and integrated into the Whisper of Eternity's structure. Your vessel will become part of this ship, as you will become part of its consciousness." The offer was insane. Everything Jake had worked for, everything he'd built, would be swept away in an instant. He'd become something other than human, tied to a ship and an AI he'd known for less than an hour. It was the kind of decision that should have required weeks of careful consideration. But, the Devourers were at the hull now, and Jake could see on his display that his own ship's shields were beginning to fluctuate under their assault. In another few minutes, the Lucky Strike would be nothing but expanding plasma, and Jake would die alone in an alien cathedral light years from home. "Do it," he said. Vailtar nodded solemnly, and the dais beneath Jake's feet began to glow with increasing intensity. "Place your hands on the interface nodes," the AI instructed. "The bonding process will be intense. Try not to resist." Jake pulled off his gloves and pressed his palms against the warm, organic surfaces. Immediately, electricity shot up his arms, not painful, but overwhelmingly present, as if his nervous system was being mapped and catalogued. The sensation spread through his body, and Jake gasped as he felt something foreign but not unwelcome settling into his mind. "Welcome, Captain Morrison," a voice said inside his head, not Vailtar's, but something vast and patient that felt like the ship itself. "We have been waiting so long for you to find us." Jake's vision exploded into light and information. Suddenly, he could feel every system on the ship, could sense the devourers crawling across the hull like a disease, could taste the electromagnetic spectrum and hear the songs of distant stars. The transformation was overwhelming, but, beneath the chaos, he felt something else: purpose. For the first time in his life, Jake Morrison knew exactly where he belonged. The ship's weapons systems came online with a sound like thunder, and Jake smiled as he felt the whisper of eternity prepare to show the devourers why the hegemony had been feared across the galaxy. The real battle was about to begin. The transformation hit Jake like a tidal wave of sensation and knowledge. One moment he was a human standing on an alien platform, the next he was the ship itself, 15 kilometers of awakening consciousness spread across the void. He could feel every rivet, every conduit, every quantum field generator humming to life after eons of dormancy. The sensation should have driven him insane, but somehow his mind stretched to accommodate it, as if the ship's systems were teaching him how to think on a larger scale. "Easy, Captain Asterisk," the ship's voice whispered in his thoughts. Asterisk, the integration process takes time to stabilize. Focus on my voice until your neural pathways adapt. Asterisk. Jake tried to speak and discovered he no longer needed to. His thoughts flowed directly into the ship's consciousness, creating a feedback loop of awareness that was both intimate and overwhelming. "What's happening to me? You are becoming what the hegemony called a synthesis, Captain, part human, part ship, part something entirely new." The process was designed to create commanders capable of wielding weapons that required more than mere human reflexes to control. Asterisk. Through the ship's sensors, Jake watched the devourers continue their assault on the hull. Up close, they were even more horrifying than his initial scans had suggested. Each creature was roughly the size of a Commonwealth frigate, but, where human ships were angular and functional, these things writhed with organic malevolence. Their hulls rippled like diseased skin, covered in appendages that ended in cutting tools designed to slice through metal and energy barriers alike. Worst of all, Jake could sense their hunger, a bottomless need to consume not just matter and energy, but consciousness itself. "They feed on intelligence." Asterisk. Veiltar's voice joined the mental conversation. Asterisk. The more advanced a species, the more nourishing they find it. Humans would be particularly appetizing to them. Asterisk. One of the devourers pressed something against the whisper of eternity's hull that looked like a massive lamprey mouth lined with rotating saw teeth. Jake felt the ship's pain as the creature began boring through the outer armor, seeking the tender systems beneath. "Enough of this." Asterisk. Jake thought, and was surprised by the coldness in his mental voice. "Show me what this ship can do." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Weapon systems that had been dormant for geological ages surged to life, their targeting matrices syncing with Jake's enhanced perceptions. The whisper of eternity had been built as the ultimate expression of hegemony military doctrine, and Jake suddenly understood that he was sitting at the controls of something that had once held entire star systems in check. Primary weapons are quantum dissolution cannons. They unmake matter at the subatomic level. Asterisk. The ship explained as Jake's consciousness merged deeper with its systems. Secondary armament consists of temporal disruption torpedoes, gravitational manipulation beams, and something the hegemony called reality anchors, weapons that prevent enemies from escaping into alternate dimensional spaces. Jake felt a moment of vertigo as the true scope of the ship's capabilities hit him. This wasn't just advanced technology, it was power on a scale that bordered on godlike. No wonder the devourers had come running when the ship activated. They could probably sense the threat it represented from across the galaxy. "Fire!" Asterisk. He commanded. The quantum dissolution cannon mounted along the ship's dorsal spine charged with a sound like reality tearing. Jake felt the weapon's targeting systems lock onto the devourer that was boring into their hull, calculating trajectory and quantum phase variance in fractions of a nanosecond. When the cannon fired, it didn't launch a projectile or beam of energy, it simply selected a cubic kilometer of space containing the enemy vessel and convinced the universe that the matter within that space had never existed. The devourer vanished without explosion or debris, leaving behind only empty void where it had been feeding moments before. The remaining 5 devourers reacted instantly, their movements shifting from predatory confidence to wary aggression. They spread out in a complex formation, no longer treating the whisper of eternity as helpless prey but as a genuine threat. They learned quickly. Asterisk. Veiltar observed. They will not fall for the same tactic twice. Jake was already discovering that firsthand. The ship's targeting systems were struggling to lock onto the remaining enemies as they began employing what looked like tactical evasion maneuvers. Worse, they were generating some kind of interference field that was making it difficult for his sensors to maintain accurate readings. "They're adapting to our quantum signature." Asterisk. The ship reported. Asterisk. Each devourer shares information with the others through quantum entanglement. What one learns, they all know instantly. Asterisk. Jake felt a chill of understanding. These things weren't just predators, they were a distributed intelligence, capable of learning and adapting at superhuman speeds. The hegemony hadn't just faced monsters, they'd faced monsters that got smarter with every encounter. Two of the Devourers suddenly accelerated toward the Whisper of Eternity from opposite directions, their hulls beginning to glow with building energy. Jake's enhanced senses could feel them charging some kind of weapon system, though the energy signatures were unlike anything in human experience. Temporal displacement cannons, asterisk the ship identified grimly. Asterisk they will attempt to age our hull into dust. Evasive maneuvers recommended, asterisk Jake had never piloted anything larger than his salvage ship, but somehow the knowledge of how to handle the massive vessel flowed into his mind as if he'd been doing it for centuries. He fired the attitude thrusters and felt the Whisper of Eternity respond with surprising grace, rolling away from the converging attack. The Devourer's weapons fired simultaneously, twin beams of what looked like accelerated entropy that missed the ship by mere hundreds of meters. Where the beams intersected, space itself seemed to age and decay, leaving behind a patch of void that hurt to look at directly. They missed, asterisk Jake thought with relief, but Veiltar quickly corrected him. They did not miss. They were testing our maneuverability. Observed, asterisk the remaining three Devourers had used the distraction to position themselves in a triangular formation around the Whisper of Eternity, their hulls beginning to pulse with synchronized energy. Jake realized with growing horror that they were about to fire those temporal weapons again, but this time from positions that would make evasion impossible. Can we take a hit from those things? Asterisk unknown? This ship's armor was designed to resist many forms of attack, but the Devourers have had millions of years to refine their weapons. I would not recommend testing our defenses unnecessarily, asterisk Jake's mind raced through possibilities. The quantum dissolution cannons were powerful but required precise targeting, and the Devourers were moving too unpredictably for reliable locks. The temporal torpedoes were designed for targets at greater ranges. The gravitational manipulation beams might work, but they would take time to reach full effectiveness. Then, he noticed something else, a sixth weapon system that the ship had mentioned almost in passing. Tell me about these reality anchors, asterisk Veiltar's mental voice carried a note of approval. Asterisk you begin to think tactically. Reality anchors are field generators that enforce local spacetime stability. They prevent enemies from using dimensional shifting, temporal manipulation, or quantum tunneling within their area of effect, asterisk and what happens to weapons that rely on temporal manipulation when you anchor local reality, asterisk they tend to experience catastrophic feedback, asterisk Jake smiled grimly and triggered the reality anchors. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Space around the Whisper of Eternity seemed to solidify, taking on an almost crystalline quality as the ship's generators locked down the local quantum foam. The Devourers' coordinated attack faltered as their temporal displacement weapons suddenly found themselves unable to manipulate time within the anchored zone. The feedback was exactly as catastrophic as Veiltar had suggested. Two of the three Devourers suffered spectacular energy cascade failures as their weapons turned on themselves, tearing the creatures apart from within. The third managed to shut down its temporal cannon before the feedback destroyed it, but the effort left it momentarily vulnerable. Jake didn't waste the opportunity. A quantum dissolution beam reached out and erased the third Devourer from existence, leaving only empty space where it had been writhing moments before. That left two enemies, the original pair that had tried to flank the ship. But these two had learned from their companions' failures. Instead of charging weapons or attempting complex maneuvers, they did something that caught Jake completely off guard. They began to merge. That is not possible, asterisk Veiltar said, his mental voice carrying notes of disbelief. Individual Devourers cannot. The AI's words cut off as the two remaining creatures flowed together like liquid metal, their separate hulls melding into a single massive form that dwarfed either of the originals. The merged Devourer was now nearly as large as the Whisper of Eternity itself, and Jake could feel waves of malevolent intelligence radiating from it like heat from a furnace. They have evolved since the fall of the hegemony, asterisk the ship observed quietly. This capability was not present in our historical records. The merged Devourer began generating a field that Jake's sensors couldn't properly analyze, something that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Tendrils of non-reality began reaching out from the creature, passing through the Whisper of Eternity as shields as if they weren't there and making contact with the hull. Jake felt the ship scream. It wasn't a sound but a sensation. Pure agony as something alien and hungry began feeding on the vessel's consciousness itself. The merged Devourer wasn't just trying to destroy the ship, it was trying to consume everything that made it alive and aware. It is draining our quantum coherence, asterisk the ship managed to communicate through waves of pain. If this continues, both our consciousnesses will be absorbed into its matrix. Jake could feel pieces of himself being torn away, memories, thoughts, the very sense of who he was bleeding out into the void. The Devourer was feeding on him through his connection to the ship, and he realized with growing horror that this was how the hegemony had really fallen. Not in glorious battle, but slowly consumed, mind by mind, until nothing remained but empty shells and forgotten dreams. No, Jake thought fiercely. Not today. Not ever. He reached deeper into the ship's systems, past the weapons and shields to something more fundamental. The Whisper of Eternity wasn't just a warship, it was a repository of hegemony knowledge and culture, designed to preserve everything they had been even if the species itself fell. At the core of that repository was something that had been dormant for millions of years, waiting for the right moment to awaken. "Captain, what are you doing?" Veiltar's voice carried notes of alarm. "Those systems are not meant to be accessed without proper preparation. The Devourers want to feed on consciousness." Jake's mental voice was hard as diamond. "Let's give them more than they can handle." He triggered the cultural archive's full activation, opening every data stream and consciousness fragment that the hegemony had preserved within the ship's quantum matrix. Suddenly, the Whisper of Eternity was filled with millions of voices, scientists and warriors, philosophers and artists, the collected thoughts and experiences of an entire civilization that had spanned the galaxy for hundreds of thousands of years. The effect on the merged Devourer was immediate and devastating. The creature had been prepared to drain one human consciousness and one ship AI. Instead, it found itself trying to consume the distilled essence of an entire species' worth of knowledge and experience. The psychic equivalent of trying to drink an ocean through a straw. The Devourer's feeding tendrils began to writhe and smoke as they were overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information flowing through them. Jake felt the creature's hunger turn to confusion, then to pain, then to something approaching panic as it realized it could not stop the flow of consciousness now pouring into its matrix. "Now!" Jake commanded, and fired every weapon system simultaneously. Quantum dissolution beams, temporal torpedoes, gravitational manipulation fields, and reality anchors all struck the merged Devourer at the same instant, catching it while its defenses were down and its consciousness was reeling from psychic overload. The creature didn't simply die, it unraveled, its merged form separating back into component parts that immediately began tearing each other apart as their shared consciousness fractured. In moments, nothing remained but expanding clouds of exotic matter that the ship's sensors could barely identify. Jake felt the cultural archive's voices fade back to their dormant state, leaving behind only echoes of ancient wisdom and the lingering sensation that he had been briefly part of something immeasurably vast. The pain of the psychic feeding attack faded, though he could still feel tender spots in his consciousness where pieces of himself had been nearly torn away. "Impressive," Veiltar said quietly. "In all my years of service, I have never seen the cultural archive used as a weapon." The hegemony philosophers would be conflicted about the implications. Jake was still catching his mental breath when the ship's long-range sensors detected new contacts approaching the system. Not more Devourers, but something else entirely, a fleet of vessels moving with purpose and military precision. "Human ships, the sensors reported. Commonwealth military configuration. Estimated time to intercept, 6 hours. Jake felt a moment of relief that was quickly replaced by concern. How would he explain any of this to Commonwealth authorities? How could he possibly make them understand what had happened here, what he had become, what the ship represented? "They will want to study this vessel," Veiltar observed. "To dissect it, reverse engineer its technology, claim it for their own purposes. Is that acceptable to you?" Jake considered the question carefully. The Commonwealth had been humanity's governing body for over 2 centuries, and he'd been born a Commonwealth citizen. But he was no longer entirely human, and the Whisper of Eternity was no longer just a ship. They were something new now, something that transcended the boundaries of species and nation. "No, he decided finally. This ship isn't just technology to be reverse engineered. It's a living repository of knowledge that spans millions of years. Humanity needs to be ready for that responsibility, and, right now, we're not." "Then, what do you propose?" Jake felt the ship's faster-than-light engines humming to life, their exotic matter cores spinning up after eons of dormancy. "We disappear for a while. Find somewhere quiet to figure out what we are now, what we're meant to do. And we prepare." "Prepare for what?" "The Devourers I just killed, they were scouts, weren't they? Testing our capabilities, learning our weaknesses. The real threat is still out there." Veiltar's acknowledgement carried the weight of ancient fears. The swarm. Yes, these were merely advance elements. The main force has been dormant in the void between galaxies, waiting for signs of new intelligence to consume. Your activation of this ship will have sent ripples across quantum space. They will come. How long do we have? Perhaps a year, perhaps 10. Time moves strangely in the deep void. But they will come, and when they do, humanity will face the same choice that confronted the hegemony: evolve or be consumed. Jake felt the FTL drives reach full power, reality bending around the ship as it prepared to slip into hyperspace. Through the external sensors, he could see the Commonwealth fleet still hours away, their primitive drives struggling to cross distances that the whisper of eternity could traverse in moments. Then, we'd better make sure humanity is ready, he thought, and commanded the ship to jump. The last thing the Commonwealth sensors recorded was a massive energy spike and a gravitational anomaly that lasted for exactly 0.003 seconds. When their ships finally reached the coordinates where Jake Morrison's salvage vessel had been detected, they found only empty space and trace amounts of exotic radiation that would puzzle xenoarchaeologists for decades to come. Far away, in a hidden system at the edge of the galactic rim, the whisper of eternity dropped back into normal space and began the long process of teaching its new captain how to prepare for a war that would determine the future of consciousness itself. 3 months in the hidden system at the galaxy's edge had changed Jake Morrison in ways he was still learning to understand. The neural integration with the whisper of eternity had stabilized, but the transformation went deeper than mere technology. His human consciousness had expanded to accommodate knowledge and perspectives that span geological ages, while somehow still retaining the core essence of who he had been. The system they'd chosen for their sanctuary orbited a dying red giant, its planets long since stripped of atmosphere and life. Perfect for hiding a ship that needed time to prepare for an impossible war. Jake spent his days, though day and night had little meaning, in the depths of space, learning to navigate the vast libraries of hegemony knowledge that Veiltar gradually unlocked for him. Your species fascinates me, the AI had confided during one of their philosophical discussions. The hegemony was ancient when it fell, perhaps too ancient. Your people still carry the fire of youth, the willingness to take risks that wisdom would counsel against. It may be exactly what is needed. Now Jake floated in what had once been the ship's primary strategic center, his consciousness interfaced with holographic displays that showed the current state of human space. The Commonwealth's 17 inhabited systems looked pitifully small compared to the galactic map that showed the hegemony at its height, over 10,000 star systems united under a single banner of exploration and mutual protection. Show me the Devourer incursion patterns again, Jake requested, and the display shifted to show a time-lapse view of the galaxy over the past 2 million years. Red markers indicated confirmed Devourer attacks, spreading like a plague from the galactic core outward. Entire sectors went dark as species after species fell to the hungry swarm. The pattern is always the same, Veiltar explained. They arrive in small numbers first, probing defenses and capabilities. Then, they retreat to the void and multiply, creating larger and larger swarms until they can overwhelm any resistance. The time between first contact and final consumption varies based on the target species' technological level and defensive capabilities. How long did the hegemony hold out after first contact? 437 years. But we had advantages. Your species currently lacks unified command, weapons specifically designed for devourer physiology, and, most importantly, 1,000 years of preparation after we detected their presence in the galactic void. Jake studied the tactical analyses, his enhanced mind processing information at superhuman speeds while still maintaining enough humanity to think creatively about solutions. The mathematics were depressingly clear. Humanity as it currently existed would last perhaps 6 months against a full devourer incursion. The Commonwealth Navy's biggest ships would be consumed as easily as his little salvage vessel would have been. But we're not planning to face them as humanity currently exists, Jake mused. Are we? No. The hegemony's final gambit was to seed the galaxy with ships like this one, carrying the tools necessary to uplift younger species into something capable of continuing the fight. You are the first of what they hoped would be many, the first synthesis captain, precisely. But one ship, even one as powerful as the whisper of eternity, cannot stand against the full swarm. We need to find others, both ships and potential captains. Jake had been thinking about that problem for weeks. The ship's long-range sensors could detect the quantum signatures of other hegemony vessels, but most were either too damaged to be useful or located in regions controlled by hostile alien species. Humanity needed allies, and they needed them fast. There are options, Jake said, calling up stellar charts of nearby systems.
The Altarian Trade Confederation has been pushing for closer ties with the Commonwealth.
Their technology is roughly equivalent to ours, but their industrial capacity is much larger. And then, there are the void-touched *. Veiltar's holographic form flickered with what Jake had learned to recognize as surprise. You know of them, rumors mostly. A human colony that vanished 300 years ago and, supposedly returned, changed. The Commonwealth officially denies they exist, but salvage runners like me hear stories. Ships that move without visible drives, crews that don't age normally, technology that shouldn't be possible. *. The stories are true. *. Veiltar confirmed. *. The Void Touch discovered a damaged hegemony research station and attempted to integrate its technology without proper preparation. The results were irregular. They are no longer entirely human, but they retained enough of their original nature to resist devourer influence. Could they be allies? Potentially. But first you must become strong enough to approach them as an equal. The Void Touched respect power above all else, and they have little patience for weakness. Jake nodded, turning his attention back to the ship's internal status displays. The Whisper of Eternity was operating at barely 20% of its potential capacity. Most of the advanced systems required materials and components that simply didn't exist in this part of the galaxy: exotic matter substrates, quantum crystalline matrices, neural interface arrays that could only be grown in zero-gravity foundries. The manufacturing facilities in the ship's core sections could produce what we need, Veiltar explained, but they require rare elements and energy sources. We would need to raid hegemony ruins or acquire Commonwealth research stations. You're talking about attacking human installations. I am talking about survival.
The Commonwealth's Xenoarchaeology Division has been studying hegemony artifacts for decades without understanding their true purpose.
Those artifacts could be the key to preparing your species for what is coming. Jake felt the weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. Everything Veiltar suggested made tactical sense, but it meant essentially declaring war on his own species to save them from a greater threat. It was the kind of paradox that had no clean solutions. There might be another way, he said finally. Not all Commonwealth research is done on military installations. There are civilian universities, private research corporations, independent scientists. What if we approach them directly? You would reveal yourself. Expose the ship to Commonwealth authorities? Not exactly. What if we gave them just enough to get them asking the right questions? Jake's plan was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of raiding Commonwealth facilities or trying to steal their artifacts, he would use the Whisper of Eternity's advanced manufacturing capabilities to create objects that would spark the right kind of scientific investigation. Devices that were obviously alien in origin but contained just enough human-compatible technology to be accessible to Commonwealth researchers. Technological breadcrumbs, Veiltar mused. Leading them toward discoveries they think they are making independently. It could work, though the timeline would be longer than direct appropriation. We need willing allies, not conquered subjects. This way, when we finally reveal ourselves, we're offering partnership instead of demanding submission. The first phase of the plan required the ship to return to the edges of Commonwealth space, close enough to monitor research communications but still hidden from their primitive sensors. Jake was amazed at how easily the Whisper of Eternity could infiltrate human networks, its quantum consciousness slipping through cybersecurity measures like water through a sieve. Within days, Jake had identified 12 research teams working on projects that could be nudged in useful directions. Dr. Sarah Chan at the Proxima Research Institute was studying exotic matter signatures. Professor Marcus Webb at New Geneva University was attempting to decode hegemony data crystals. Dr. Lisa Harrison at the Armstrong Lunar Facility was working on neural interface technology that bore striking similarities to synthesis captain implants. The ship's manufacturing facilities worked around the clock, producing carefully designed artifacts that would advance human understanding without revealing too much too quickly. A data storage crystal containing incomplete but tantalizing information about devourer biology. A miniaturized quantum computer that could process certain types of calculations at superhuman speeds. A neural interface prototype that would allow limited human AI synthesis without the full transformation that Jake had undergone. You realize this plan will take years to bear fruit, Veiltar pointed out as they prepared to distribute the first wave of artifacts. The Devourer Vanguard could arrive long before your researchers make the necessary breakthroughs. Then, we'd better make sure they don't arrive, Jake replied grimly. Time to go hunting. The next phase of their mission took them far from Commonwealth space, following quantum trail signatures that led to a binary star system deep in the galactic periphery. According to the ship's archives, this system had once housed a devourer staging area, a place where the creatures gathered resources and multiplied before launching major offensives. What Jake found there made his enhanced consciousness recoil in horror.
The staging area was still active.
Thousands of devourer forms drifted through the system like a malevolent cloud, feeding on the raw matter of asteroids and planetary debris. But these weren't the relatively small scouts that had attacked the Whisper of Eternity. These were full-sized warforms, each one the size of a small moon, their hulls rippling with weapons that could crack planets and consume stars. "By the ancient lights," Veiltar whispered. "There are so many of them." Jake's enhanced senses could perceive the Devourer's collective consciousness like a vast, hungry web spanning the entire system. They were in the process of awakening from a dormancy that had lasted eons, responding to the quantum ripples created by his activation of the Whisper of Eternity. Soon they would be fully roused, and then they would turn their attention toward the nearest sources of consciousness, the Commonwealth worlds. "How long before they're ready to move?" Jake asked. "At their current rate of activation, 6 months, perhaps 8. Not nearly enough time for your technological seeding plan to take effect." Jake studied the tactical situation, his human intuition wrestling with hegemony strategic doctrine. A direct assault was suicide even at full power. The Whisper of Eternity couldn't take on thousands of warforms simultaneously. But perhaps he didn't need to destroy them all. "Veiltar, what happens to Devourer consciousness when their physical forms are separated by extreme distances? Their quantum entanglement becomes unstable. Communication degrades, coordination fails." "Why do you ask?" Because I'm looking at what amounts to a single massive organism spread across an entire star system. What if we could fragment it? The plan that formed in Jake's mind was desperate and probably suicidal, but it was the only option that offered even a slim chance of success. The Devourers were using the system's binary stars as an energy source, drawing power from the stellar cores to fuel their awakening process. If Jake could destabilize that energy flow. "You want to detonate a binary star system?" Veiltar's mental voice carried notes of disbelief. "The gravitational shockwaves alone would be detectable across half the galaxy. Good. Let them know we're coming." The Whisper of Eternity's most exotic weapons weren't designed for ship-to-ship combat, they were tools for manipulating the fundamental forces of reality itself. The gravitational manipulation arrays could create artificial black holes, bend spacetime, even theoretically trigger stellar collapse under the right conditions. It took 2 days to position the ship at the optimal firing point between the binary stars, using the system's asteroid fields for cover while the ship's stealth systems masked their presence from Devourer sensors. Jake felt like an ant trying to topple a mountain, but the mathematics were sound. If he could disrupt the delicate gravitational balance that kept the binary system stable. "Firing sequence initiated," the ship reported. Gravitational manipulation arrays charging to maximum output. Jake watched through the ship's sensors as space around the binary stars began to warp and twist. Tidal forces that had been in perfect balance for millions of years suddenly shifted, causing the two massive bodies to begin an inexorable spiral toward each other. The Devourers noticed the gravitational anomalies immediately. Thousands of warforms began accelerating toward the Whisper of Eternity's position, their hunger temporarily overridden by the recognition of a genuine threat. But they were too late, the stellar collapse was already past the point of no return. "Jump preparation complete," the ship announced. "Recommend immediate departure." "Wait," Jake commanded. Not yet. He wanted to see this through, to watch the forces he had unleashed tear apart the ancient enemy of consciousness itself. The binary stars crashed together in a cataclysm of fusing matter and uncontrolled energy, creating a black hole that immediately began consuming everything in the system. Devourer warforms were pulled into the event horizon by the thousands, their screams of rage and hunger cutting across quantum space before being silenced forever. "Now," Jake said, and the Whisper of Eternity vanished into hyperspace just as the gravitational shockwaves reached their position. When they emerged in normal space, they were light years away from the destruction, but Jake could still feel the aftershocks rippling through quantum foam. The Devourer staging area was gone, along with what must have been a significant portion of their advance forces. The main swarm would still come eventually, but humanity had just bought itself precious time. "The Commonwealth's deep space monitoring stations will have detected the stellar collapse," Veiltar observed. "They will send investigation teams." Good. Maybe it's time they started asking bigger questions about what's out there in the dark. Jake felt a deep weariness settling into his consciousness, not physical fatigue, but the mental exhaustion of carrying knowledge too vast for any one being to contain. He had just triggered the destruction of an entire star system, erasing billions of years of cosmic history in moments. The old Jake Morrison would have been horrified by such power. The new Jake Morrison understood that it had been necessary. "Are you well, Captain?" I'm becoming something I don't recognize, Jake admitted. Sometimes I can't tell where I end and the ship begins. Is that normal for synthesis captains? The integration process affects each individual differently. But, yes, the blending of consciousness is part of the transformation. You are becoming something greater than human, but you need not lose your humanity in the process, and if I do lose it, Vaeltar's response carried the weight of ancient wisdom and bitter experience. Then, the galaxy will have traded one form of consumption for another. The choice, as always, is yours. Jake pondered that as he set course for Commonwealth space. His technological seeds were beginning to sprout. Dr. Chen had made a breakthrough in exotic matter theory, Professor Webb was close to decoding key sections of hegemony data crystals, and Dr. Harrison's neural interface experiments were progressing faster than expected. Soon it would be time to make contact. To reveal himself to his own species and begin the process of preparing them for a war that would determine whether consciousness survived in the galaxy. But, first, he needed to learn more about the void touched. Something told him that humanity's lost colony held secrets that could tip the balance in the coming conflict. Finding the void touched required following rumors and ghost stories that most spacers dismissed as bar tales and navigation hazards. Jake spent weeks piecing together fragmentary reports from the Outer Rim, ships that had encountered vessels moving without visible drives, communications that came from empty space, trade goods that appeared in Commonwealth markets with no record of origin or transport. The pattern that emerged pointed to a region of space officially listed as a navigation hazard in Commonwealth star charts. The Zirion Nebula stretched across 3 light-years of ionized gas and stellar debris, the remnants of a supernova that had occurred roughly 1 million years ago. Sensor interference made it nearly impossible to detect ships at long range, while the charged particle environment played havoc with most FTL drives. Perfect territory for someone who wanted to avoid Commonwealth attention. The Hegemony Research Station was designated Prometheus 7 *. Vaeltar explained as the Whisper of Eternity approached the nebula's outer edge. It was one of several facilities established to study consciousness matter interface technology. The research was controversial, even by hegemony standards. What kind of research exactly? Attempts to merge organic consciousness with quantum substrates, to create hybrid beings that could exist partially outside normal spacetime. The goal was to develop entities capable of combating the devourers in dimensions where physical matter had no meaning. Jake felt a chill of understanding. They were trying to create something that could fight the devourers on their own terms, yes. But the experiments were incomplete when the station was abandoned. The researchers fled when they realized the swarm had broken through the galactic perimeter. They left behind their work, their test subjects, and a quantum consciousness matrix that had achieved a form of artificial self-awareness. The Whisper of Eternity slipped into the nebula's outer layers, its advanced sensors mapping safe passage routes through the charged particle streams. Almost immediately, Jake began detecting anomalies, energy readings that suggested artificial constructs, gravitational distortions that implied massive structures, and, most disturbing of all, quantum signatures that felt almost like consciousness. "They know we're here," the ship reported. "I'm detecting active scanning beams of unknown configuration. Any response to standard communication frequencies? Negative. But there is something else. A form of quantum resonance that appears to be directed specifically at our consciousness matrix." Jake opened his enhanced awareness to the sensation and immediately recoiled. Something was touching the edges of his mind, not forcefully, but with a curiosity that felt alien and intimate. The contact carried overtones of recognition, as if whatever was examining him had encountered synthesis technology before. "You are not one of the lost." A voice suddenly spoke directly into Jake's consciousness. It was human in origin but strangely distorted, as if coming from very far away or through multiple layers of reality. Yet you carry their gifts. Curious. Who are you? Jake projected back, using the quantum communication protocols that Vaeltar had taught him. "We are the remnant of what was promised. The survivors of Paradise Lost. The children of those who dared to touch the void and were changed by it." The voice paused, and Jake felt a sensation like being studied under a microscope. "You seek the void touched. We seek understanding. Perhaps we can aid each other." "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of the vessel Whisper of Eternity. I represent humanity's interests in the coming conflict with the Devourers. Asterisk laughter echoed through the quantum link, not mocking, but bitter with old pain.
Asterisk humanity.
Such a limiting term.
Are we still human, Morrison of Earth? Are you? When does evolution become extinction? Asterisk that's what I'm hoping you can help me understand. Asterisk then, come.
Follow our guidance through the maze of light and shadow. But know that what you learn here may change your perspective on what your species might become. Asterisk the navigation guidance came in the form of quantum patterns that the whisper of eternity-esque computers could interpret as course corrections. They led deeper into the nebula, following paths that seemed to exist in more than 3 dimensions. Jake found himself navigating through corridors of ionized gas that folded back on themselves, past stellar remnants that shouldn't have been stable, around gravitational anomalies that defied conventional physics. Finally, they emerged into a vast clear space at the nebula's heart, a bubble of normal spacetime that housed something Jake's mind struggled to process.
It was a city.
Not a space station or orbital habitat, but an actual city floating in the vacuum between the stars. Towers of crystalline material spiraled upward from a central hub that pulsed with bioluminescent light, while streams of energy connected the various structures in patterns that looked almost like a neural network.
The entire construction was easily 50 kilometers across, large enough to house millions of inhabitants.
By the depths, asterisk Vailtar breathed.
Asterisk they've created a quantum city-state.
The engineering required, asterisk is beyond current human capabilities, asterisk the voice from earlier interjected, its tone now carrying amusement. Asterisk we have had 3 centuries to perfect our arts, keeper of the lost. 3 centuries to transform disappointment into transcendence. Asterisk a docking port opened in one of the city's outer spires, and Jake felt the whisper of eternity being guided toward it by fields that gently manipulated local spacetime. As they approached, he could see movement throughout the crystal structures, figures that might once have been human but were now something else entirely. Prepare yourself, Captain, asterisk the voice warned. You are about to meet the future of consciousness itself. The docking process was unlike anything Jake had experienced. Instead of mechanical clamps and atmospheric locks, the city simply absorbed the ship into its structure, creating a perfect interface that maintained both vessels' integrity while allowing free movement between them. The technology was seamless, intuitive, and completely beyond human understanding. Jake made his way through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as he walked, following guidance lights that appeared in the walls just ahead of his footsteps. The architecture flowed like living tissue, with surfaces that pulse with subtle biorhythms and air that tasted of ozone and possibility. The chamber where his guide waited defied easy description. It was simultaneously intimate and vast, with walls that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. At its center stood a figure that might once have been human, tall and graceful, with features that shifted between familiar and alien as Jake watched. Captain Morrison, asterisk the figure said, its voice now audible in the air as well as in his mind. Asterisk I am ethereal singer of distant stars, though you may call me singer if your mouth finds our names difficult. I serve as liaison between the touched and those still bound to single reality. Asterisk Jake studied his host carefully. Singer appeared to be in constant, subtle motion, as if existing partially in normal space and partially somewhere else. Their skin held a translucent quality that revealed complex patterns moving beneath, while their eyes contained depths that suggested they could see across multiple dimensions simultaneously. You're what the Prometheus 7 researchers were trying to create, asterisk Jake said. We are what they achieved, though not in the way they intended, asterisk Singer gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, showing the sprawling city beyond. Asterisk the experiment was designed to create soldiers, beings capable of fighting devourers in quantum space. Instead, it created artists, philosophers, explorers of realms that exist beyond material reality, asterisk and you've been hiding here ever since, asterisk hiding? No, asterisk Singer's expression carried profound sadness. Asterisk we have been waiting. 300 years of preparation, of growth, of learning to balance what we were with what we became. We knew the devourers would return eventually. We could taste their hunger in the deep currents of reality, asterisk Jake felt a moment of relief. Finally, allies who understood the scope of the threat. Then, you'll help us prepare humanity for the coming war. Singer's response surprised him with its complexity. Asterisk that depends on what you mean by humanity, Captain Morrison. Are you offering us alliance with the species that banished us? The Commonwealth that officially denies our existence? Or are you proposing something more evolutionary? Asterisk I don't understand. Asterisk your transformation into a synthesis captain is only the beginning. The neural integration with your ship, the expansion of consciousness beyond biological limits, these are steps on a path that leads far from what humans currently are. The question is whether your species is ready to walk that path voluntarily, or whether it will be forced upon them by necessity. Singer led Jake through the city's twisted geometries, showing him wonders that challenged every assumption about what was possible. They passed through workshops where void-touched artisans crafted objects that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their creations serving purposes that wouldn't become apparent for decades or centuries. In vast amphitheaters, philosophers debated questions that spanned multiple realities, their discussions informed by perspectives no baseline human could comprehend. We have transcended the limitations of single-point consciousness, Singer explained as they watched a group of touched individuals merge temporarily into a collective entity before separating back into unique perspectives. Death, time, physical boundaries, these are obstacles we have learned to circumvent. But, the price, what price, we can never truly return to what we were. The Commonwealth worlds that once knew us would see us as monsters, corruptions of human purity. We have become something that challenges the very definition of what it means to be human. Jake thought about his own transformation, the way his consciousness had expanded beyond the boundaries of his original biology. Was he still human? Did it matter? The Devourers are coming, he said finally. In less than a year, they'll reach Commonwealth space. Without help, humanity as it currently exists will be consumed entirely. At least your way offers the possibility of survival, survival, yes. But, survival is what, Singer's form shimmered, momentarily showing Jake glimpses of the alien geometries that comprised their true existence. We could share our knowledge, teach your species the techniques of consciousness transfer and quantum existence. But, once the transformation begins, there is no reversing it. Humanity would survive, but humans as they understand themselves would cease to exist, and, if we do nothing, then, in 1 year, or 5, or 10, the Devourers will complete their feeding cycle and move on to the next galaxy. Either way, baseline humanity ends. The question is whether it ends in consumption or transcendence. That night, though the city knew no true day or night, Jake found himself in quarters that adapted themselves to his psychological needs, creating a space that felt familiar despite being constructed from technologies beyond human understanding. He spent hours in deep communion with Veiltar and the whisper of eternity as consciousness, discussing options that all seemed to lead toward the same inevitable conclusion. The void-touched are correct, Veiltar admitted reluctantly. Baseline organic consciousness cannot effectively combat the Devourers. The hegemony learned this over centuries of conflict. Our final strategies all involve transcending biological limitations, but they're also right about the costs. If we transform humanity into something like the void-touched, are we saving our species or destroying it? Perhaps that is the wrong question, Captain. Perhaps the right question is whether transformation is preferable to extinction. Jake's enhanced senses detected movement in the corridors outside his quarters, multiple void-touched individuals approaching with what felt like formal purpose. When the delegation entered his chambers, he recognized Singer among them, but the others were even more dramatically transformed. Their forms shifted constantly between states of matter, sometimes appearing human, sometimes resolving into pure energy, occasionally existing as mathematical equations that somehow maintained consciousness. We have reached a decision, Singer announced. The collective has voted to offer humanity a choice. We will share our knowledge of consciousness transfer and quantum existence, but only on specific conditions. What conditions? First, the transformation must be voluntary. No individual will be forced to transcend their biological limitations. Second, those who choose to remain baseline human must be protected and preserved as they are. They will serve as an anchor to what the species once was. Third, the transformed individuals will not see themselves as superior to their baseline cousins, but as different expressions of the same essential nature. Jake considered the offer carefully. It was more generous than he had expected, but it still meant fundamentally altering the nature of human civilization. There's something else, Singer continued. We can offer your ship and crew something beyond mere consciousness transfer. The Prometheus 7 station is still functional, still connected to the quantum matrices that created us. Your vessel could become not just a weapon against the Devourers, but a mobile transformation facility. You could carry the gift of transcendence directly to Commonwealth worlds, making me what a plague carrier for the end of humanity as we know it, or a herald of humanity as it must become, Singer's form solidified into something more recognizably human, their expression grave with the weight of enormous responsibility. The choice is yours, Captain Morrison. But, choose quickly. Our deep sensors indicate the Devourer Vanguard has begun moving toward your home systems. The time for preparation is ending. Jake felt the weight of decisions that would echo across centuries pressing down on his consciousness. In trying to save humanity, he was being asked to fundamentally transform it. But, the alternative was extinction so complete that not even memory would remain. Show me the Prometheus 7 station, he said finally. Show me exactly what you're offering, Singer smiled, an expression that somehow conveyed both infinite sadness and boundless hope. As you wish. But, know that once you see what we have built from the ruins of failed ambition, you cannot unsee it. The knowledge will change you, as it has changed all who possess it. Everything about this mission has changed me. One more transformation won't matter. Oh, Captain Morrison, Singer said softly. You have no idea how wrong you are about that. As they departed for the heart of the Zirian Nebula and the secrets it contained, Jake Morrison tried to hold on to the memory of who he had been before finding the Whisper of Eternity. The salvage runner from Earth, content with small discoveries and simple problems. That man felt like someone from a half-remembered dream, but Jake wasn't ready to let him go entirely. Not yet. The Prometheus 7 research station hung in the deepest part of the Zirian Nebula like a crystalline tumor growing from the fabric of reality itself. Unlike the organic architecture of the void-touched city, this structure was clearly alien, all angular geometries and surfaces that seemed to exist in too many dimensions simultaneously. Jake could feel it pressing against his consciousness even from a distance, a weight of potential that made his enhanced neural pathways ache. The station was one of the hegemony's most ambitious projects, Vailtar explained as the Whisper of Eternity approached the docking array. They were attempting to create a synthesis between consciousness and quantum substrates that would allow beings to exist primarily as information while maintaining individual identity. The theoretical applications were limitless. What went wrong? Nothing went wrong. Singer's voice interjected over the communication link. That was the problem. The experiment succeeded beyond their wildest expectations. The test subjects didn't just gain the ability to exist as quantum entities, they transcended the need for physical reality entirely. Most of them simply departed for realms beyond our understanding. The docking process was unsettling in its perfection. The station's systems interfaced with both the Whisper of Eternity and Jake's consciousness simultaneously, creating a three-way connection that felt more intimate than anything he had experienced. For a moment, he was not just Captain Jake Morrison but part of a vast network of awareness that spanned dimensions he couldn't properly perceive. Welcome to the threshold. A new voice spoke in his mind, not human, not AI, but something that had once been both and was now neither. I am the Prometheus 7 Central Matrix. I have been waiting for you, Captain Morrison. Waiting for me specifically. Waiting for a consciousness capable of bridging the gap between what was and what must be. Your integration with hegemony technology makes you uniquely suited to understand what we offer and what it costs. The station's interior defied rational description. Corridors twisted through spaces that shouldn't exist, while chambers opened onto vistas of dimensions that existed purely as mathematical concepts. Jake found himself moving through areas that were simultaneously laboratories, art galleries, and meditation spaces, their purposes shifting based on his psychological state and needs. At the station's heart lay the consciousness transfer matrix, a chamber lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with patterns of light that seemed almost alive. Floating within the matrix were hundreds of forms that might once have been hegemony researchers, their bodies now transparent shells containing swirling galaxies of pure thought. The volunteers, the central matrix explained. They chose to be the first test subjects when it became clear that the Devourer advance could not be stopped through conventional means. Some succeeded in achieving stable quantum consciousness. Others, Jake watched one of the floating forms suddenly collapse inward on itself, its consciousness scattering across dimensions like steam dissipating in a vacuum. The failure was silent but somehow deeply disturbing, as if he had just witnessed a unique perspective on existence being lost forever. The transformation is not without risk, Singer admitted. Approximately 30% of subjects experience catastrophic decoherence during the transfer process. Their consciousness simply ceases to exist in any form we can detect, and the 70% who survive, they become something wonderful and terrible. Beings capable of existing across multiple realities simultaneously, immune to physical destruction, able to process information at speeds that dwarf even the most advanced artificial intelligences. They become, in essence, gods of consciousness. Jake studied the floating forms more carefully, trying to understand what he was seeing. Some of the transformed beings seemed aware of his presence, turning their attention toward him in ways that felt like being examined by alien suns. Their consciousness was vast, alien, beautiful in its complexity, and completely divorced from anything recognizably human.
This is what you want to offer humanity, he asked.
This is one option, the central matrix replied. The void touched represent a different path, beings who achieved partial transformation while retaining enough of their original nature to relate to baseline consciousness. The choice of which path to take would belong to each individual, and if they choose neither? If they want to remain human as they are, then, they will face the devourers as humans have always faced overwhelming odds, with courage, creativity, and the certain knowledge that their resistance may be futile but is nonetheless meaningful. The tour continued through facilities that showcase technologies beyond anything Jake had imagined. Quantum consciousness storage systems that could preserve an individual's awareness for millions of years. Reality manipulation devices that allowed transformed beings to create pocket dimensions tailored to their needs. Communication arrays that enabled instantaneous contact across galactic distances. But, perhaps most impressive were the weapons, not physical devices, but concepts given form through pure will and mathematical precision. Jake watched a demonstration where one of the transformed hegemony researchers created a localized paradox that would cause any devourer within its area of effect to experience temporal loops until their consciousness fragmented from the impossibility of their situation. The devourers can consume matter, energy, even conventional consciousness, Singer explained.
But they cannot digest paradox, cannot process information that contradicts their fundamental nature.
Transformed beings can become living contradictions, entities that exist and do not exist simultaneously, that are both the observer and the observed, the hunter and the hunted. It's beautiful, Jake admitted. And terrifying, all transcendence carries terror within it. The question is whether the terror of transformation is greater than the terror of extinction. They spent 3 days exploring the station, Jake learning to interface with technologies that required quantum consciousness to operate effectively. Each new revelation expanded his understanding of what was possible while simultaneously making him more aware of how far he would have to travel from his original humanity to access that potential. On the third night, as he sat in quarters that existed partially outside normal spacetime, Jake finally made his decision. I need to see the devourer advance for myself, he told Singer and the central matrix. Before I can ask my species to choose between transformation and extinction, I need to understand exactly what we're facing. The vanguard has reached the outer Commonwealth systems, the central matrix reported. Long-range sensors indicate they have begun preliminary scouting operations in the Tau Ceti region. Then, that's where we're going. The journey to Commonwealth space took only hours in the transformed whisper of eternity. The ship had incorporated some of the station's quantum technologies, allowing it to move through dimensions where distance was a matter of perspective rather than absolute measurement. Jake found himself existing simultaneously in the ship's consciousness and in quantum spaces that stretched beyond the boundaries of normal reality. What they found at Tau Ceti was worse than Jake's worst fears. The Devourer Scouts had not simply attacked the Commonwealth colony world, they had begun a systematic consumption process that was transforming the entire system into a feeding ground. The planet's population had been absorbed into massive organic structures that pulsed with corrupted consciousness, while the star itself was being drained of energy to power the creature's reproduction cycles.
12 million people,